just saw one of the stupidest videos I think I've seen on this app. Well, let's get into it.
That is incorrect. Fundamentally incorrect. Capitalists want you to think that that is correct because they like paying you less than a living wage. They like seeing you struggle because if you struggle, then they can keep you under their thumb. That's how it works. Way back in 1938, when we established the minimum wage here in the United States, it was described as a wage that supported living in the economy of the United States, such as one person could go to work for full time and receive enough wages to support their entire family, including housing, food, clothing, and spending money and money to save, etc., etc. It was defined very clearly when we established a minimum wage, what the minimum wage was. You don't get to change that definition just because you like to pay people slave wages.
So let me tell you where you're wrong. The Fair Labor Standards Act of 1938 did nothing but cover 1/5 of the U.S. population and then establish a federal minimum wage at 25 cents per hour. Now, FDR was in favor of it being a livable wage, but there's a reason that it legally is not and never has been. You see, socialism doesn't work. It just doesn't. Capitalism creates a healthy competition and incentive to acquire more skills, to be more valuable to an organization, right? Otherwise, why would people go to school to be surgeons or be architects or be engineers when they could just earn the same amount of money flipping a burger? So I agree, minimal skill, minimal wage. Now, I'd like to also point out here, right, because your argument to this will be, well, we're not saying that they shouldn't have different levels in wage, but a livable wage. You signed the job offer, okay? You signed that job offer. You accepted the wage that they offered you. Why is it their responsibility to make sure that you can keep your lights on? Their job is to pay you for the work that you do under the job description that you signed. That's what it comes down to. It is not their job, right? If you don't think you're getting paid enough, get a new job. If that job isn't paying you enough, get a second job. Or, may I add, advance your skill set so you can become more valuable to the organization and get more money. This is why capitalism works, because people will move up when they put in the effort. It's pretty simple.
First of all, I'm Canadian, so we're gonna skip over the legal definition of stuff and those semantics. Regardless of whatever happened in the past, we can use logic going forward. First of all, if capitalism was so great, how come billionaires go on, like Fox News Business and whine, nobody wants to work anymore? Second of all, it's an incredibly unrealistic standard. Oh, everybody's gonna go get new skill sets. Okay, so let's say a town of 50,000 has 5,000 young men. They all go for plumbing because that's really popular in that town. That's what the market calls for. That education, those skills, become worthless and not as transferable. Now, that is probably not the best example. Trades are a wonderful field and, plenty of opportunity there. But specifically, we're talking about people that exist in the gig economy. As someone that has worked in construction, you know how often throughout the course of my life, and I'm not most people, I'm pretty much a homebody, but do you know how often I've had to rely on a minimum wage employee when I go to the grocery store, when I get a coffee, when you're going to work, when you're hungry as fuck after you've just been working out in the sun all day? Plus, maybe it's a bit of like ADHD, overwhelm and stuff. Have you ever tried working in McDonald's? I walked out the same fucking day I got hired because the beeping in those machines and then people yelling at you and just, ugh. I think that is a very difficult job. I'd rather slam rebar all day. Not only can not everyone in society have the means or the ability, for whatever reason, to advance their skill sets and get out of a minimum wage job, but we need those fucking jobs. We rely on them on almost a daily basis, especially the more affluent you are. Everybody deserves dignity, the ability to afford the very basics in life. We don't want them to make the same as a doctor. No, because a doctor is an invaluable skill set and huge investment. I don't know if you know this, but a lot of medical staff are severely underpaid, especially considering the amount that they're overworked. On top of that, it makes sense. We want the people to be able to afford to live in the city that they work in. And this isn't saying that you're someone that makes $100,000 a year, someone that makes minimum wage should afford the same lifestyle as you when you're a crane operator. We're saying that we should focus more as a society on building more affordable units, smaller houses, bachelor and studio apartments that they could afford, basic shelter for the most vulnerable people in our society, the elderly community, the veterans, the disabled community. You know, this all boils down to, so I grew up in an area near an indigenous reservation, and one of the most common complaints that people had about the indigenous community was, oh, they're not paying taxes. First of all, they don't pay provincial taxes. They still pay federal taxes. The provincial taxes end up going to the band, and it's just a different form of government. Then we could get into all the shit with the Indian Trust Fund, and shut up. People think that people are getting something that they're not. They think there's a limited amount of money to go around. No, we're talking about people having the basics, and minimum wage should be tied to the inflation rate. If minimum wage goes up, then so does the corresponding minimum wage, and by extension, your wage. So inflation is 6%, you get a 6% raise. Yes, people will raise their prices, but when everybody has the basics and the ability to go out to eat once in a while, to explore the world, live life, hang out with friends, smaller businesses will do better. What we have is crony capitalism, and it does not fucking work. It does not breed innovation. It does not incentivize people to go to school, which can cost tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars. You might have a point, even though it would still be pretty ableist, if school was free. But you know what I find really stupid is that people operate under the thinking of, oh, well, if you do this, people are going to raise their prices. So what? Shit costs what it costs. Everybody deserves healthcare, affordable housing within their means, a livable wage that allows them to afford the basics, and dignity. That's what we start society at. And then we go from there. The billions and trillions that we make, that comes after everybody's basic needs are met, because by far that is the cheapest solution. Like, you want to consider yourself fiscally responsible and conservative for the economy. Don't listen to the fucking asshats that are in power using it for their benefit to tell you what is appropriate and what will make the country work. You give money to the poorest people in society and they will immediately spend it in their local economy because they fucking have to, instead of allowing it to be absorbed in things like rent with a landlord who's an investor who bought a bunch of properties and is exploiting a housing crisis. Give that money to the mom and pop shops. And that whole, oh, you signed the contract, you know what you were signing up for, like there's any other fucking choice. Oh, just get another job. Most people don't have that option. It can take months, if not years, to find that better job. So what do they got to do in the meantime? They got to fucking survive somehow. So they end up working 2 or 3 jobs, and then their health suffers because they're not getting proper sleep. They're working themselves to the bone and stressed about money, which raises cortisol spikes, which can, like X, Y, and Z, that ends up costing us more in healthcare. Do you know how much we spend on homeless initiatives? Do you know how much we spend on petty crime related to low socioeconomic opportunity? The person that I see when I go get a coffee, I want them to have a good life. Why don't you? You're fucking weird. You're a monster. You're a shit human being. Oh, I want them to have less so I can have more. It's a sick society that we live in. Anyway, I guess that was my rant. Everyone deserves to have the fucking basics. We're not talking about luxury. We're just talking about the basics. They should be able to afford medications if they're sick. They should be able to afford food, healthy food. And nobody's rent or living costs, in my opinion, should be above 25%, unless they choose to have that for extras. But they should build more affordable units. Instead, we have to have these $1 million cookie cutter homes. So the option is you either pay people enough to attain what society deems as worth investing in, or we invest in things that make the livable wage for people at the bottom less. Like, if these companies don't want to pay their employees more, then advocate for the fucking municipality and city to build affordable rental units that don't price gouge every single penny they can possibly get. Like, I swear, am I crazy? You can either be a decent fucking human being, or you can learn corruption properly, because, like, are the rich and powerful stupid? I grew up very privileged with more than the basics. I was a fucking teenager 20 plus years ago, making $11 an hour. I was getting like $300 a week. My parents never made me pay rent. My parents let me spend the money like fucking crazy. I got a really nice bike, a couple really nice guitars, and I sold them all. I grew up, and then I learned about the value of my dollar, and you know, my parents just wanted me to get the stupidity out when I was young. I wanted something nice, I had to work for it, but I just don't know. Like, I worked at a bowling alley. My mother owned it, and I mean, we went through a number of staff over the years, but we also had people that lasted for fucking ever because my mother paid well. She would allow us to swap shifts. We did it all the fucking time, and you know, she didn't care as long as she didn't have to be the one at the front counter. It got to the point where as I got older, I pretty much worked every fucking day when I was an adult. You know, one thing my mother said, she said she's going to pay her workers well because they're what makes her the money, and it's the cheapest thing in the cost of running to the business, right? Like, the amount of money you spend on supplies, the amount of money you spend on custom-made machine parts. Do you think that harmed the business? I tried really fucking hard. We were good workers. It got to the point where, depending on how busy it was, I would either do the snack bar, or usually what would happen is I would be working the front and the back behind the machines, because I knew those machines so well because I was a little kid and I grew up and I could fix pretty much any problem pretty quickly. If a big problem happened, you just transfer people lanes, whatever, not the point. I wasn't gonna find another job because I'd be making like student minimum wage was like $6.25, and I was making $11 an hour. So I performed like I wanted to keep that job, and I did. Now, it happened that the Monday Night League basically dwindled in half 1 year later on when I was a full adult. But because for so many years I'd been working that shift, I got to the point where I had such a good rapport with the bowlers that the league didn't fold. They all stayed there. They wanted to keep coming, and it was only like 4 lanes. But it kept money coming in, and it kept money coming in through the summer, which is usually when the bowling alleys and the leagues end, and, you know, a dip in profits. The whole time it would allow me to be there, make money on snack bar. I'd go cook, and I would also strip and oil the lanes. Which, at least the way we did it, to strip the lanes, I had to push this like 300 fucking pound machine across oily lanes. And I'd have to drag an approach bar, which was like 50 pounds or so. And it was like a big rake thing. And then I would have to oil the lanes and push a freaking 150 foot extension cord across 20 different lanes. Pay people a livable fucking wage, because they care about their jobs a hell of a lot fucking more if it meets their needs. Also, that's not fucking socialism. Jesus Christ. Socialism would mean the workers owning the means of production. So for like publicly traded companies and shit like Amazon, they get a seat at the table, they get revenue share and stocks and blah blah blah. Then they also get a seat at the table where they can talk about internal matters and strengthen workforce, unions, that kind of thing. You equate letting capitalism do whatever the fuck it wants, and anything that's not that, to socialism. Now, we are not a purely capitalistic society. Every economy, and a healthy economy is a mixed economy, but the more it goes towards a certain direction, which is what we're currently in now, totalitarian extremes in any sense, no. But social assistance and dental care, health care, and a livable wage are not socialist policies. They are social policies. But socialism is an entire economic framework. You can't just equate everything you don't agree with to something like socialism or communism, especially when they're programs that were created within capitalistic societies as a band-aid because capitalism does not work for everybody. Anyway, go buy my books. Links are in my profile, or you can find them on Amazon. I suppose I should have green screened the pictures there, but you know. Just search author Devin J. Parker. I feel like this world is making me go insane. Like, all the answers should be fucking easy. They can be as corrupt as they fucking want to. Take care of the environment, healthcare, education, make housing and groceries affordable and attainable. Let us have a fucking boat so we can go fishing or go on a trip with our family every once in a while, and then fucking take the rest. Just be as corrupt as you want to. I don't really care. Like, we're dealing with wildfire smoke here, and everyone's just like, oh, well, I want you to make less, the person at the bottom. Like, fuck you. We got a fucking trillionaire, a bunch of multi-hundred billionaires. Fuck them. They can pay their fair share for once. Restore the taxes to what they were before fucking Reagan in America, and kind of similar in Canada. That's not socialism. That is just basic regulation to ensure that a system that is set up to maximize profit at all costs doesn't decide that our lives and our well-being are a sacrificial cost. It ensures that corporations do the legally, ethically, and moral thing, because they're not going to do that unless we make them do that. Why do we live in a system where someone that's worth hundreds of billions, hundreds of millions of dollars can effectively pay no fucking taxes and then get a tax return? Like, Amazon as a company, all the contractors and everything that their system perpetuates, the amount of cars that they end up having on the road, they can pay to fix our fucking roads. On top of that, like, the work from home stuff should be encouraged, but because investors invested a lot of money in these high-rise buildings, get back to fucking work to justify my shitty investment. People are more productive at home, but that doesn't matter because they want you pushed down. Anyway, be a decent fucking human being, and thank you for coming to my TED Talk, I suppose.